Really awesome that everyone showed up. Last session of the day. It's just between us and happy hour, I think, at the Data After Hours party. Hopefully everyone's had a great summit. My name is Matthew Gillia. I'm one of the solution architects here at Databricks. With me, I've got.
Hey everyone, my name's Tim Kessler, Field CTO at Redox.
All right. This has been a partnership that we've had Databricks and Redox for quite a long time. Tim and I have actually gotten to know each other the last couple of years, and being able to do things with FHIR, interoperability, it's something that I've always wanted to do when I was a customer, and now it's really a privilege to get to be able to do this as a solution architect at Databricks and working with a partner like Redox. So,
Great. Really quick introduction, who I am. My name's Tim Kessler. I mentioned I'm the Field CTO at Redox. Been with Redox for the last 9 years now. And actually, before joining Redox, I used to do implementations at Epic, where I had the pleasure of helping people navigate how difficult it is to integrate data both outbound from these ecosystems as well as writing it back inbound. Oh, clicker's a little sticky,
yeah.
so we'll.
A little quick introduction to myself. Of course, I am a solution architect here at Databricks, but my background is I spent almost 15 years at Excellis Blue Cross Blue Shield in upstate New York, where I live with my family. Did everything you can imagine at that Blue Cross Blue Shield. Started as an analyst, and then it was eventually the first data scientist, principal data scientist, then principal analytics and data architect. And what you're going to see here with this healthcare data with interoperability, it's really what I've always wanted to build, and now we get to do it. So, Tim?
Great. Awesome. So just a quick introduction on Redox, who we are, before we dig into really the meat of this presentation. So Redox, we exist to make healthcare data useful. And where we really look to enable that is, we think about what the High-Tech Act was 2009, quite a while ago. So we've seen rapid adoption of healthcare data systems, EHR systems. We finally digitized healthcare, but actually getting it out of these ecosystems into platforms like Databricks, where you can really drive a lot of value, is still quite difficult. So we started about 10 years ago in Madison, Wisconsin. If you're familiar with the healthcare industry, you might know another large company in there, in that town. I worked there previously doing patient access revenue cycle implementations. I think I was employee number 15 at Redox or so. I think like 19 of the first 20 were all former Epic. So we really got our roots kind of learning how to deploy these ecosystems, get them live, up and running. And then we wanted to find a way to get the data out of those ecosystems in a friendly developer, friendly manner to actually make this data usable and flexible. So today we're over 150 employees. We're transacting over 2 billion transactions per month through our platform. We're connected to over 10,000 healthcare organizations, streaming bidirectional data. So not just pulling data out into Databricks, but also writing it back into the EHR, putting it at the point of care. So when I say like pushing this back into the EHR, I actually mean like writing notes into a system, pushing flow sheet values back in, hitting clinical decision support webhooks to be able to pop up data for a provider at the point of order entry. So we're really talking about getting this data back into the EHR at the hands of the provider or the end user's fingertips to really drive as much value as possible and ultimately shift some of the decision making made by these folks within that ecosystem. When we think about the interoperability cycle, especially within the data engineering ecosystem, we really view Redox's role as handling that connectivity, that translation of the data, and the normalization of the initial normalization of that data. So connectivity, what I mean, this is healthcare. We still see a lot of VPN-based connections, a lot of MLLP over VPN to transact event-driven HL7 messages. If you've ever worked with an HL7 message, you're going to see it here today. It's a kind of old pipe delimited format that can be a bit annoying to work with. So we translate that to JSON values. Specifically, we primarily work with FHIR data. We're really looking to push FHIR within the broader ecosystem. But of course, we can support translating this to pretty much any format you're looking to work with. And then we handle a lot of normalization of that data as well. So if you've worked with EHR data, if you've worked with many, many different systems, you might have Epic in the inpatient setting, you could have Athena Health in the outpatient setting, you could have some other system in kind of a physical therapy ecosystem. Epic might send, for patient sex, they might send male or female. Athena Health might send 1, 2, or 3. That other system might send an alphanumeric code. We'll normalize those all into a consistent value so that when it lands into Databricks, there's a lot less work that you need to do to get that data ready to work with. But then when we look at actually driving a lot of value from the data, Redox doesn't log into your system. We don't deploy anything directly within Databricks. That's where we really rely on partners to help enrich that data, drive a lot of value, and actually build with that data. So when I think about leveraging AI in the healthcare ecosystem, when I think about a lot of what exists today, that connectivity can be incredibly difficult. I have another slide that I'm not going to bore you with that highlights all of the archaic legacy ecosystems that exist today that you really kind of need to support in order to tap into these systems. Redox handles all of that out of the box. It's all within the Redox toolkit. So when you deploy Redox in your ecosystem, you don't have to think about supporting IHE profiles or XDS.B exchanges or how to translate an XML-based CCD into 45 FHIR resources to start making sense of that. I've also mentioned that I've really highlighted the EHR aspect of it, but healthcare data can live in any system, and connecting to all of those systems can be a bit different. So when you work with Redox, we really want to deploy all of the tools within that ecosystem to handle that connectivity so you're never building custom. I also want to mention that we're really, really quick about doing this because we've built this all already, because we have over 10,000 integrations with healthcare organizations throughout the US. A lot of the pipes already exist, which means we don't necessarily have to build this from scratch. So in scenarios where we're already integrated with a healthcare organization, we already have data flowing, routing that into a Databricks environment takes about 20 minutes, however long it takes to deploy that Databricks environment, however long it takes to actually kind of stand up that new destination. So that can be extremely fast, but even if it's a net new integration from scratch, it's about 3 weeks to get that deployed. And that's mainly just going around finding the network administrator, finding the bridges integration analyst, finding the application analyst who's going to determine what data flows. And again, our role is how do we make that as easy as possible? How do we put the tools in your hands so that you have that control to ultimately build that connection yourself too? This kind of puts everything together. So when we think about where Redox sits within that ecosystem, our goal is connecting to all these source systems, providing the tooling to make that incredibly easy, simple to go from zero to production level go live in as quickly as possible, so that you can start landing data in Databricks immediately and start actually driving value from that data that's been kind of locked in many of these different silos for so long.
Before you move on, Tim, I just want to kind of point out something on this slide. So I was actually in the HLS industry booth earlier today and yesterday. I got several questions about each one of these types of clinical data. Several of you are in the room right now. Do you handle X12? The answer with Databricks, of course, is yes. Can you handle XML? Of course, the answer is yes. But if you don't use Redox, then you have a data engineering problem for each one of these types of file formats, potentially now a data mart or a set of silver tables for each of these particular types of files. By having it go to Redox and having Redox then change that into FHIR, now you have one standard way of ingesting the superset of your clinical data, which then means you only have one data engineering pipeline you have to worry about to create a clinical data mart. So you get value out of this data really quickly, so you can be using it for machine learning insights and affecting patient care at the site of care. So of course, after all that, right, we're here at the Databricks conference, right, Data and AI Summit, and as you can see, all of the different types of data that's going to be flowing into your Lakehouse. The idea here is that this clinical data is going to be able to unlock all of those use cases that you've always wanted to do. Or if you're a payer, for example, and you're thinking about plan to plan, you're going to be a great payer that's going to be receiving lots of new members to your commercial Medicare, Medicaid lines of business. And what that plan to plan really means is that you're going to be able to know everything about that member before they even start with your plan. On day 0, you're going to be able to know from their clinical information that you're receiving in FHIR, things like which HEDIS denominators they're in, which HCCs for risk adjustment they might already have, which care plans they may currently be on from the prior plan's care management team. All of the analytics and insights that you currently run now, if you're a payer, that requires claims analysis and claims run out to actually come in before you can actually do that. Plan to plan is going to allow you with FHIR to be able to know all those things and run all those analytics before the member even joins your plan. So being able to take that data in, ingest it easily, parse it, make sense of it so you can use it for all of these use cases that you want to do with it, including your existing use cases you do today with your members. That's what Databricks is going to make easy, and we're going to show you how that works with the direct integration with Redox and Databricks in a few minutes. So this is what the demo is going to look like in a second here. So of course, there's going to be EHRs. If you are a provider, you very likely already have an EHR that you have to enter all of your information in. But it can be very difficult, even if you own that system, to pull information out of it. And often you're going to want to do things like real-time operations, real-time hospital operations. Redox is able to look at Epic or look at Cerner and listen for certain transactions, such as potentially ADTs that you may already be generating today to send to other partner organizations. Turn those into FHIR, which we can then land in Databricks, of course, with our Lakehouse architecture, and then use that for machine learning, right? So we actually have a customer, it was a provider system that wanted to use their own ADTs, which they were generating for payers, of course, to predict and forecast their bed usage, right? So that they would actually be able to do nursing staffing much easier. And then once they had that information, they needed to post that back into the EMR itself so that they could then make sure that they had that information there, those insights for the folks that were actually working inside Epic itself, right? So that is the use case that we've actually delivered together, Redox and Databricks. If you are a payer, you're making observations about your members all the time, right? So we are maybe looking at somebody who has an inpatient stay at a behavioral health facility, for example. And if you have a behavioral health inpatient stay, you know that there's a HEDIS measure that you have to have that person see a specialist within 7 or 14 days. That's incredibly difficult to affect change on if you're not looking at real-time information, right? So, but those ADTs, right, if you've actually used those ADT V2s, HL7 V2s, they can be actually quite difficult to really use and turn into enterprise. Having it go from something like those older HL7 V2s into FHIR in one clinical real-time ingestion, fully streaming, now you'll be able to make that enterprise. You'll be able to use that for those predictive models, and then potentially even send those observations back using Redox into Epic and Cerner, so that at site of care, potentially a social worker or BH specialist, or even schedule the BH specialist on behalf of the member. That's all possible with this joint partnership that we have. So this is what's going to be what the demo is, and we're actually going to be using the prior authorization mandate as the example. So for folks that are aware of the prior auth mandate, you will be required to use FHIR to send and receive these prior auths, right? So the mandate says that within 72 hours, we have to be able to respond to these. And if you are a payer, you know that most of the time we actually approve claims. We don't deny them most of the time. And if we could have done it faster, we would have a long time ago, right? Because all of our stakeholders really hate the fact that it takes so long for something like a prior authorization to happen, including the doctors and our members and our patients itself, right? So with the power of something like Redox and Databricks, we're going to be able to help you meet this mandate a little bit faster. So that's what the demo is going to be. So what I'm going to do right now, unfortunately, they don't let me do a live demo here at Summit, so this is pre-recorded. But this is my screen here. I'm going to be logging into my version of Redox. So you have to hit play. There we go. Perfect. OK, so I've got my username and password there. I'm going to log in. And of course, this is the Databricks Redox environment. I'm going to be using a dev environment today, but of course, Redox has staging and production as well. Previously, I've made a destination. This destination actually represents a volume in Unity Catalog, which means that every transaction that is going to come through Redox could be sent, again, from the EMR directly to Databricks and Unity Catalog with that volume, where you'd be able to stream ingest it. So what I've done is I've actually sent some ADTs directly to our Unity Catalog volume here. As you can see from those logs, they were already successful, so it's very quick. It turns it from that whatever format it might be into FHIR. Here you're seeing a workflow with a file arrival trigger that immediately gets kicked off as soon as those files hit your volume. And what we're going to do is using only SQL, no specialized software, right? No Scala, no Python, no RDDs, literally just SQL with the new variant data type. We're actually able to completely stream that in using autoloader and some dynamic SQL running against a serverless SQL warehouse. And that's going to create first our bronze tables using variant, which will completely parse that. You'll see that here in a second. And hopefully the glare on the screen is not as bad as it is for me. Right now, I'm showing you this variant bronze table here, and we'll look at the sample data. And this is the way I like to do my bronze tables, sort of key value pair. You saw the file metadata there a second ago. This is that variant FHIR. This FHIR column is a variant data type. Without knowing anything about the JSON schema of this data, we're able to completely parse all the way down every single element of this data. Now, if you understand FHIR, and you're in the room and you probably do, the entry array is where all the really great resources are. And you can have a CCDA that's been turned into FHIR, and that might be hundreds of resource types in that entry array. And the patient resource need not be the first one. It might be the 15th one, right? Or you might have one that's just for scheduling a clinician or a PCP for the patient. That might be only 5 or 6 resources in the entry array, and they might be completely different. What that means is that the normal big data schema on read, from JSON, where you know what the schema is, does not work for FHIR, which is why you've always needed specialized software before. What you're seeing here is really in the last 7 months with the advancements at Databricks for Databricks SQL is that now you can just use regular old SQL, or you can use Python if you want as well, but no more specialized software. And this will work, to be candid, for any JSON. If it works for FHIR, it means it works literally for anything, which is really cool. So this workflow that you're seeing here that got kicked off, that allowed us to actually create both bronze and silver tables, one silver table for each resource. If you come to the industry booth, you would actually see this workflow, and you may have already seen it from me earlier today. All of that now is powering this AI/BI dashboard. Many people don't even know that latitude and longitude is even in the patient resource, for example, but right off of there, we're able to create a map, pull that out. We can see some information about the encounters, and we can even see some information about claims. Now, for prior auth, the service request bundle that would be created has a number of different resources, but one of the resources that will come in a prior authorization style request is going to be actually a claim resource itself, which sounds kind of silly because it's not really a claim yet. It's what the claim will be once it is approved, for example, or what we're requesting the claim to look like. The way that you will know if it is a prior authorization claim is if the use actually says prior authorization. So a few minutes ago in the little AI/BI dashboard, we identified which ones actually had by filtering on the use. We saw prior auth. Now we have a prior auth bundle that is in my system. And here what we're doing, I'm actually showing how you can make a map really quickly, so which is great. So that's AI/BI there right in the notebook. You might have noticed there a second ago that that was the bronze table that I was writing that off of, and that's just to prove that you can actually write SQL directly against any element of that FHIR bundle immediately if you wanted to. I don't recommend it in reality, but it's just to prove that it is possible. You'll notice at the top there's that bundle UUID. That's the one for the prior authorization widget here, and you could just see now we're just again looking at the looking at this specific bundle now as the FHIR variant column, and this entry array is very specific for this particular type of bundle, which is that service request bundle. And there's the patient resource and so forth. So now what we can do is just using SQL again, we can lateral explode this and actually, using that SQL, start to parse that out, pull out the resource type, pull out the full URL, which is really the primary key of the resources itself, and then be able to write SQL against that even easier, be able to filter it. Here what you can see is I've actually exploded it a little bit so that now the claim resource, the person resource, those are now columns if I want to do that. Because maybe I want to take this information and I want to shoot that over to my utilization management team, such that my nurses and my medical directors maybe have some information that they want to get from that. Of course, the bundles themselves, they don't tell me what the descriptions are, but I can use the power of the data intelligence platform here and the AI query function to ask it things like, hey, take these diagnosis codes and take the procedure code that I'm being requested and give me a summary of that just using an LLM. So here I was using MetaLlama 3, 70B, and really quickly in SQL, I'm able to actually now parse everything about this particular service request here. You can see the diagnosis codes. It's a professional claim. There's the diagnosis code summary. There's some knee injuries, for example. And then the actual description, the long description, super long description, not the long description we're used to, right, which just is usually 10 words if you're familiar with the ICD-9, ICD-10 sort of descriptions, but actually like a full description, like something that maybe a medical director or a nurse would really actually be able to use as far as what's actually happening, including things like how long that particular service even takes. So next, let's see, I'm gonna point this right here. Okay, there we go. Oh. Okay, so now that where's the mouse to play this? Sorry, technical difficulties. There we go. Okay, so now we need to actually respond to this, right? So let's say that we've sent this information all the way off to our utilization management team, and they now need to, they've approved this particular service request, and now we need to send it back as FHIR in order to actually let the clinician know that they are good to go. This could actually happen really at site of care. What you're seeing here is a little bit about how you can actually get the schema of those things from Variant. But I want to talk a little bit more about prior auth. If you think about it, because the FHIR bundles are able to actually take any clinical information, right? Any encounter, that previously had happened, such that the criteria for this particular service would be approved, any diagnostic reports, any clinical notes that maybe back all this kind of stuff up. All of that could be packaged in these bundles such that when the payer receives it, if they're able to parse this really easily in the way that we can now with Databricks, they, instead of using things like interqual criteria, they could actually just run analytics right on there and maybe approve it immediately and then shoot it back to Redox so that maybe even at site of care, maybe the patient is actually able to even have that service be done while they're in that same visit potentially, right? So the ability for things to be truly real time, even for something like prior authorization, is possible with FHIR because of the ability for us to bring in so much great information. So how do you take your Lakehouse data and turn it into FHIR? We use dbignite, which is an accelerator that we've developed here at Databricks, and you can use a low-code mapping like you see on the screen. This claim response, for example, there's some outcome that I need to create, and that's going to come from some other column, potentially like event outcome or something like that. And then once you have that mapping, you're able to then throw it into our mapping manager, and then that will turn it into the actual FHIR resources itself. Now, the way to think about this low-code mapping, you're very familiar probably with source-to-target mappings from your data management practice. You have a source, column, and table. You have a target resource, piece of information in FHIR. All you need to do is do that, put it into that format that you saw. The transformation has happened by dbignite automatically for you. A few minutes ago, you may have saw that all those curly brackets and arrays were all presented there for that claim response. If you've tried to type that manually like I have, and I know Tim has, that is incredibly complicated. I would much rather have something like dbignite do that. And now we have another accelerator that the blog for this was just released just a couple of days ago. My colleague Emma Yamada is the one that wrote this package. This is the redoxwrite package. It's in Python where you're able to interact directly with their API. So as long as you have those FHIR bundles ready to go that you generate from your Lakehouse, you can really easily post these back. So now this is an observation. As I mentioned a minute ago, you may be making observations either, again, as the provider itself or as a data science team at a payer. And now maybe I want to post that back. Maybe the probability of sepsis has increased because someone has transferred from one unit of a hospital to another unit of a hospital. I want to make sure that folks know that that has increased so we can maybe take care of that immediately. There you can see the status 200. Redox would then have taken that and then shot that right back over to the EMR so that we can do whatever we need to do. Here I am logging back into Redox now where I can see that with the logs that the observation crate has come through and they've processed that, and then Redox would understand how to push that right back into Epic in that way. Now this, what's really cool is that this particular package, this particular API, it's not just for posting things back. It also is for retrieving things. So you could have an agent framework. Of course, we're at the Data and AI Summit, so it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about AI agents a little bit. But suppose you were a care manager and you were working with a patient or a member, and you were just curious, like, I wonder if there's any new diagnostic reports or any new lab values, right, that might be out there. it's totally possible to actually take this, and you're going to see it here in a second. You can take this API and actually serve it using Mosaic model serving with a MLflow PyFunk flavor. Talk to me after if you want to learn more about that in great detail. And then serve that as a SQL function, which then you could use to then for any AI agent to be able to use. So this right here is just a little bit of code that's showing how you would do that. And then so this is a recording, so I can't just jump to the fun part here, but you can see that this is the way the steps that it's done. And what's great about this then is that then you can ask it any type of question that you want. So for example, the diagnostic report, or you could say, tell me the most recent patient encounter. It would go out to Redox, receive that information from something like Epic, and then send that back to you, where then you'd be able to display that, for example, in a care management app or utilization management app. Let's see, this is a little too much detail probably for folks, so let me see if I can fast forward this. Okay, here we go. There's the make request. So now we're able to use, again, AI query right there, using parse JSON again. That's turning it into variant, right? So this is an API that's being called in SQL, in the Databricks SQL editor. And it's able to, again, post that observation, for example. And because of that parse JSON turning into variant, now anything that used to just be JSON, now you can just write SQL against that, turn that into a table function, for example. And let's see when I get to the good part. Really want to fast forward this, but okay. So there you can see it's that's the variant there. The mouse doesn't show up on here, otherwise I would totally fast forward through this. Apologize. Okay, here's the SQL function now. Now here's the example I was talking about. Now I've got this patient. I want to search for their latest diagnostic reports. So I've just got a little CTE right here that just says I want to post for a diagnostic report search for that patient. And then I can pass that into my Redox request SQL function, which again is just a SQL version of that API. I wrapped it in Mosaic model serving in order to do that. And then I can then write SQL against this. And then what you're going to see here is that it's going to return all of the diagnostic reports in order for this particular patient. Sometimes it's going to be rich text, as you'll see. There's some information about where it came from. And sometimes it'll actually be the binary for a PDF. And when it is that binary for the PDF, you can then do a Spark write binary and actually have the physical PDF itself. So you could be surfacing, there's the binary for the PDF, you could actually be surfacing the actual diagnostic report itself as an image, as a PDF image in your care management app. That's the power of what FHIR is able to do. It's even able to even take things like this binary here. Okay, I think that concludes the demo.
Awesome. And if anybody really wants to see that demo live, I know Matt's done it probably like 200, 300 times today alone.
Yeah, we needed to make it fit within the 40 minutes. So I'll just mention a few things. So the workflow that we kind of breezed over really quickly. I mentioned fully streaming, using autoloader, creates the bronze, creates the silver tables. We offer a FHIR ingestion workshop now at Databricks where you can talk to your account team about that. We come on site with a lab workspace and we teach your data engineering team how to make that workflow. So I go in great detail, every element of that SQL, why I chose the things that I did. Can't obviously do that here. It's like a 4-hour workshop. So, and then in the industry booth, if you met with me yesterday or today, or maybe even tomorrow, we did cover it a little bit, but I didn't go through every element of that workflow. But we absolutely can come on site and teach you how to do that. And then as far as things like everything that you saw today is fully on my GitHub and open source. You're able to go and use that and practice, including on synthetic data. We have ways of generating that for you as well, so you can practice ingesting these FHIR JSONs.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're interested playing around with the Redox portion of this that ultimately streams, we saw HL7 ADT. We also have XML-based CCDs that you can stream in a FHIR format into Databricks. And we'll soon be offering X12 payloads as well to be able to stream that. That's all available completely free on Redox's site. So if you just sign up for a developer account, you can play around with this tooling immediately. We highlighted, so Matt highlighted the one capacity planning patient throughput use case, how to route patients through the right location within the organization before digging into the demo. Then the demo focused on prior authorization, that bidirectional read-write exchange, all in real time. There's a ton of stuff that you can do with data in real time, both with the power of Databricks as well as Redox powering that data feed both into Databricks as well as writing back into the EHR. So I include a couple in here that we've implemented for our partners already, but there's basically any scenario where you can imagine consuming data, maybe automating a query to pull a clinical summary as soon as that patient's discharged and you receive that ADT AO3. That's all stuff that can be automated directly within Redox to then land that data in Databricks and ensure that you have all the content necessary. So if you're curious about any of these use cases or any of the capabilities, please don't hesitate to come up and ask us either right now or at the happy hour we're going to be doing right after this. So if you're really looking to grab a drink, which I know I am after today, we'll be heading over just a block away and everyone's welcome.